Always hear men advising each other not to open up because women do this. Give me examples of how it happened to you. Story 1. My dog of 14 years died from lung cancer, and I went into a mild depression for a bit. She caught me crying in secret one day and asked me what was the matter, so I opened up. I told my wife at the time I was having a really tough time dealing with losing my dog. I thought I would get some compassion, maybe even a hug. She told me to get over it. It was just a dog. We divorced shortly after, and I have not pursued another woman since. That was nearly 12 years ago. Story 2. Not used against, but totally backfired. In my mid-20s, my girlfriend noticed I was in a bad place and asked me to explain my feelings. I described feeling depressed, disillusioned, alienated, and stressed. Afterward, she looked at me with an expression of disgust. No support, no help, just a desire to run away from me. And I didn't volunteer this information unsolicited. She asked for this information. I think this is a common story and ultimately the reason men develop a fear of expressing vulnerability to women. Story 3. She didn't really use it against me. She just responded very dismissively and basically called me a coward. So I dumped her, and 3 months later I met the love of my life, to whom I can express any feeling or vulnerability in complete safety. Never settle for a woman who tries to make you feel bad about yourself. Brothers. Story 4. Used my insecurities against me when we were arguing, and she realized she was wrong. Told me I had a small penis and a useless penis because I needed medication to make it work. Story 5. I opened up to my girlfriend in college about being falsely accused of sexually assaulting a girl who was obsessed with me back in high school. Fast forward a few months later, we had a very nasty argument, and in the heat of the moment, she said something along the lines of, I had to drop my standards to the level of dating a sexual abuser. Needless to say, I learned my lesson, and I ended up leaving her some time afterward. Though she did apologize profusely afterward and stated she said it in anger. Once bitten, twice shy. Story 6. I was told I had a 10% chance of making it through a bone marrow transplant. After I left the hospital, I broke down on the way home. My wife, with many less than flattering words about my manhood and sexuality, told me to be a man and stop acting like a fool. Yeah, that was a fun day. Laugh out loud. Story 7. I thought I had a close friend when I was a teenager because she confided in me about her own experience of abuse. But when I tried to tell her about my own experiences, I knew I had done the wrong thing because she reacted with anger, and another girl joined in and told me not to pretend I was a victim of sexual abuse because boys are always eager. Another time, the person was just like, I can't make it go away, toughen up. During a really bad time, all I wanted was a response to the occasional text. I had been there for her before, like in the above story. What you learn is that nobody supports us. We are the support. Story 8. It backfired on her, much to my amusement. See, she deliberately coaxed me into revealing a painful time from high school. She then thought she had something on me that she could use against me. On a couple of occasions, she tried to use that episode against me and shame me for it. She even claimed that it was something that I was using as a crutch, even though she was the one who brought it up. She couldn't comprehend, even after explaining it to her a few times, that I regarded this episode as a learning experience and that I had grown a lot as a person since then. It was just an unfortunate life lesson to me. She couldn't understand the concept of personal growth. Story 9. At the suggestion of a therapist, I started keeping a journal of my thoughts when I was upset. I used it to capture intrusive thoughts on paper and then evaluate whether the thoughts were legitimate or not after I was no longer upset, usually the next day. A significant portion of the journal's contents involved situations and reactions to a particularly problematic period in my relationship with my partner and the dynamics with her kids. I didn't outright hide the journal, but it resided in a drawer in my office desk, generally out of sight, to the point where I felt anyone stumbling upon it would recognize it as private. I had to travel across the country for work, and we were expecting a tropical storm to possibly pass near us while I was in transit. In preparation, I dug out our hurricane gear, refilled a pile of flashlights with fresh batteries, and left them out in a place where they could be easily grabbed. As I landed and turned off airplane mode on my cell phone, I received a barrage of text messages from my partner along the lines of, "I was looking for flashlights in your desk and found your journal. I was curious and read through it and am hurt that you feel this way," followed by a complete freak out. I assumed the relationship was over based on her reactions, as she had sent me messages that she had emptied my dresser and thrown all of my clothes into a giant pile in my home office, then blocked me. I came home a week later and explained the purpose of the journal, the reason why I used it, and how it helped me work through tough and emotional situations in my head. We discussed that she sees a therapist regularly, and I have never questioned her about the topics or my presence in those talks, and that I should be afforded the same dignity. The situation settled down, and I thought it was behind us, but deep down, I knew it would continue to be an issue in the back of my mind. I threw the journal away and stopped using it as a method to work through my emotions, thinking the ordeal was past us. A few months later, my partner was going through a tough patch mentally and lashed out at me over something small, escalating into a full-on one-sided yelling match from her. I attempted to have a level-headed conversation and talk through the issue, as getting into a heated back and forth was not going to benefit either of us. In her anger, she brought up several extremely personal attacks based on things I had directly written in a journal entry. I countered her with the same explanation I had made before, that the journal was my method of working through my emotions, and it wasn't fair to weaponize that against me while she was angry. As she stormed out of the room, she loudly exclaimed how I should make sure to write down this argument in my journal. Since then, the topic of the journal has come up a few different times when she is upset, and each time I attempt to explain to her that she was the one who invaded my private emotions, and it is unfair to use those against me in arguments. I find myself being much more closed off with showing my true emotions, as I now have concrete proof that they will be used against me when she becomes upset, knowing deep down that it is an unhealthy situation to feel this way. Story 10. She told me I was perpetuating the cycle of abuse onto her, when she was also abusing me way worse than my past ex did. Society cares very little about men being abused by women in this oppressor versus oppressed narrative. Story 11. I had my first love from high school commit suicide. She passed 10 years after high school, but it hurt a lot and cut deep. My girlfriend at the time was supportive until she made it about herself, saying that I'd rather be with someone who died than her. The last message I sent before she passed was about how happy I was with this girlfriend. There are real monsters in this world. Story 12. I have a bunch of things going on, and while fairly drunk, I opened up to a girl I was seeing about it all. Some anxiety and some post-traumatic stress disorder stuff. She was very receptive and caring in the moment. It came out later, though. I need a real man, not someone who does certain things. I don't talk about that stuff with romantic partners anymore. Story 13 was dating my ex at the time. Over the course of the relationship, I opened up to her about how my dad was abusive to me as a kid. I won't go into detail, but it was bad stuff. She asked questions and was very kind and supportive in the moment. But then when we'd get into arguments, as most couples do, she had a tendency to get unreasonably angry. One night, we were going to bed, and she was having her period and was wearing my nicest pair of sweatpants. I gently asked if she'd be willing to change into a pair of my pajama bottoms instead. She started crying, said I should never have asked her to do that, and should have let her ruin the sweatpants instead of asking her to change. I was shocked, tried to explain that my request wasn't meant to be hurtful, and tried to console her. Then she says, "Now I'm worried that you're going to treat me the same way your dad treated you and your mom." I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I don't have a violent bone in my body, and she knew that. She weaponized my own abuse against me. I regret to say that I stayed in the relationship for a while after that comment, but that moment was when the relationship died. I'm still a bit messed up by it, not gonna lie. Story 14, yup. Told first wife my vulnerabilities, and she used them against me every time she was mad at me. She hurt me emotionally. I told second wife some fake vulnerabilities. She uses them against me every time she's mad at me. No emotional damage this time. Story 15, my first relationship, when it came out that I was being cheated on, I didn't really react with anger, but I kind of shut down and I was teary-eyed. She told me that it was embarrassing seeing that I'd cry about something like that. Story 16. I have had childhood sexual abuse when I was a kid, so I get a bit uncomfortable when hugged or touched in certain areas. My now ex-wife at the time didn't understand at first until I finally told her 4 years into the marriage. After that, she treated me more dismissively, called me weak, dirty, and a pervert. She refused to have children with me because she was afraid my curse would come on them. I'm still healing from all that and do not like anyone touching me. Story 17. My sister asked for a piece of my fortune after I die. I am a decade younger than her. She abused and neglected me growing up, so we had no relationship at all, and she is already wealthy. But she wanted more. When her behavior upset me, my other sister and mom tried to guilt and shame me and tried to normalize asking for my money and her talking about my death. I no longer talk to most of my family. Good riddance. Story 18. There's not enough space here to list all of them, but I can summarize. When their definition of masculinity is toxic, anything resembling actual humanity is deemed a weakness and not attractive. Anything from expressing emotions to not being fit enough to even having any trauma at all can be considered non-masculine. It's a horrible thing to be so ill-equipped to assess what it means to actually be human. And from my experience, women do not like listening to perspectives which can call their perceptions of what masculine and feminine is into question. Story 19. Told her about my passions and past struggles. She memorized every single detail and made fun of me or would just criticize me for having hobbies in which I'd spend my money without harming my financial situation, and manipulated me into thinking that I didn't spend enough money on her. She harmed herself over it and used emotional vulnerability by threatening to harm herself over any argument we had. She had her sister calling me and texting me to fix the situation. And of course, she cheated. Story 20. Not my partner, but my mother. When I told her about my depression and suicidal thoughts, she said, "I have depression too. Does that make me lazy?" When I cried during a conversation, saying, "I don't want to kill myself, but I can't see any other way," she just said, "Don't cry in front of me." After that, she told every person she knew about this. She literally called her distant relatives just to tell them. However, my girlfriend at that time was the exact opposite. She cared for me, supported me, and didn't make fun of me. Sorry for the bad English. It's not my first language. Story 21. We were talking about sexuality and our preferences. She asked if I had ever been with a black woman, to which I said no. I hadn't at that time found myself attracted to that many black women in person. Unfortunately, I'm not from a very diverse area. This girl was fair-skinned with black hair, which was my type at the time. She then gave me a lecture about my white privilege and closeted racism. I had only been with about 6 people in my life at that point. She had been with over 20. When I asked if she had been with a black man, you can guess the answer. Edit. For those that are bad at nuance, no. The answer was no. Her parents were extremely racist. Story 22. A friend of mine committed suicide, and a woman I knew urged me to share how I felt about it. She could tell it really bothered me, so she acted extra nice and caring to get me to talk. Then she acted all angry and disgusted and went around telling everyone what a creep and weirdo I am. Moral of the story: never talk to them about anything. They don't care. They just want to look like they care for approval. Story 23. Been told that the woman who threatened my family and my own lives multiple times just liked me, and that women harassing men was normal. Been told that my being abused by teachers as a kid was good because it taught me what pain feels like. Of the half-dozen or so women that I've opened up to in a non-therapeutic context, 3 have responded positively. 1 was my mother, who already knew my story, and the other 2, on separate occasions, later came out as transgender. 1 is a man and the other is non-binary, which is about as funny to me as it is sad. I've seen it happen to other men countless times. A friend of mine cried when his father died and got dumped. Another friend got physically abused because he said that her insulting him was painful. I've had it happen to me, and I've seen it happen so many times as well. Not all women do it. I've noticed that as I've gotten older, women have been far more mature and far more likely to respond positively to me opening up about smaller things, though I'm not ready to talk about the big stuff with women yet. And that's sort of the problem. It's not that no woman wants us to open up, or that women will always use our insecurities against us. It's that for a lot of us, the damage is already done. And for a lot of others, they'll happen to meet one of the many women who is like that. If you're not like those women, I respect that more than you can imagine. Unfortunately, though, a simple "it's okay" isn't going to be enough unless you say it a million times. We are scared, not because we hear that opening up is bad, but because during most of our childhoods and a lot of our adulthoods, it doesn't matter how loud you scream from the rooftops. People are actively avoiding listening, which creates a vicious cycle. If nobody cares about a man's emotions, how should we expect him to care about the emotions of others? I'm seriously asking, if you teach someone that emotions are to be ignored from the day they hit puberty, who the hell are you to expect them to turn out as anything other than an emotionally stunted person? I've seen many bad men. God, so many. And I feel a lot of emotions when I see a man like that. Anger, disappointment, sadness. But one thing I have never been is surprised. Not a day goes by that I don't wonder how much better and safer the world would be if we weren't so cruel to our boys.